How's the sound? Can you hear? Great. If you're in the back and can't hear, we do have a bunch of seats up here. Your ward Alderman Katjana Ballantyne is going to kick things off.
So good evening. Thank you so much for coming this evening. My name is Katjana Ballantyne. I am the Ward 7 Alderman. I'd also like to introduce some of my colleagues in elected office who are here. Representative Christine Barber is in the back. The Mayor of Somerville, Joseph Curtatone. A school committee member for Ward 7, Carrie Normand. And is there anybody else who I didn't see? Okay, thank you. So if any of you have been at our previous meetings, I like to ask you a few questions so you know who's in the audience and you know who your neighbors are. So I will, when I ask you a question, if you could raise your hand. So how many, raise your hand if this is your first ResiStat meeting. Okay, welcome. Welcome. Raise your hand if you have lived here under a year. Welcome. Raise your hand if you've lived here under 3 years. Raise your hand if 5 years or less. 10 years, between 5 and 10 years. Okay. 10 to 15? Okay. You guys are the stalwarts who always come. 20 to 25. Okay. Oh, that's me. Okay. Over 25 years? Wow. And how about someone who has lived here their entire lives? Okay, thank you. Raise your hand if you are a parent or a grandparent who has children in the Somerville Public Schools. Okay. Raise your hand if you've walked by the construction over at the Powder House and if you know what's going to happen there. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Construction. Raise your hand if you travel through Union Square on a daily or weekly basis. Okay. Is there any other question that maybe anybody in the audience throw a question out you'd like to know about who's here in the...
Do you know what's going to happen with the bridge at West Square?
Okay, yes, I'm sure that'll be a discussion. So raise your hand if you know that the Ball Square Bridge on Broadway will be closing starting in January. Well, okay, no, it was December, it's January. I'll let Mr. Rawson talk about it. So I'm sorry, would you raise your hand again if you know that that bridge is going to be closing? Okay. So now everybody knows in the room that's going to be closing and it's in construction. Okay. Any other question?
Are you bothered by the airplane?
Okay. Raise your hand if you're bothered by the airplane noise. Okay. All right. So, yeah.
If you hold on a minute,
that one's going to be done. Okay. And okay. So the empty lot in Teele Sq, I'll just give a quick update. There were a number of community meetings. It was permitted 4 weeks ago. So the next step is going through EPA review, doing test samples of the soil. But there's supposed to be a boutique hotel going in there. And we will have follow-up meetings in terms of construction and keep you updated on, what the timeline is for that. So I will just give one more. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to know about? Yes?
Tell me the hotel chain that's going in?
At the moment, that has not been identified, but some of the brands that they were talking about was Marriott and I'm not exactly sure what that flag or the brand that they're going to use right now. Okay, so thank you very much for coming. This is our opportunity to ask questions. The city is here with many of the department heads to answer questions about what's going on in the city, or share with us what's going on in the city, what impacts us directly here in Ward 7. So I will be here throughout the meeting, and as always, happy to answer any questions and we'll stay later.
So for those of you who have not been here before or forgot, which is totally understandable, my name is Megan Ackerman. I work in the city's communications department. So one of the things that I do is organize these meetings. We do them twice a year in each of the city's 7 wards. This fall, Ward 7 is the final meeting of the series. So you're closing out a series of 7 meetings. Congratulations. Which means we've like perfected the presentation. Everyone is really good to go. As the alderman mentioned, and some of the things people were raising their hands that they were interested in, it's no secret that there is a lot of construction currently going on in the city, and there's going to be more coming online. So that's really going to be the focus tonight, just to make sure that everyone is prepared for work that may be coming up, that may be impacting your commute or your life. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out. Mayor Curratone is going to talk a little bit about why is this all going on right now. It kind of feels like there's just construction everywhere you look. And then we're going to get into some of the projects that will affect you right here in your neighborhood, or are kind of nearby, or are large enough that they're going to be felt citywide. And just a couple of housekeeping notes, because we are in a different space this time. If anyone is looking for the restroom, if you go out this door, turn right, it's on your left. There is also a water fountain. If you go out this door, basically straight across on the right, we have some cups over there. We also have a trash can over there by the food, and we'd appreciate your help in just keeping the space clean and getting all of the trash in there. And also, as the alderman said, she'll be here afterwards, as will all of us. So, if you have a question that doesn't get answered, or if it's something that you'd rather speak to someone one-on-one, or maybe it's kind of an involved question, we will be here. If we don't have someone here who can address your question or issue, my card is on one of the back tables there with the other literature. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I will get you in touch with whoever it is that can talk with you about whatever is going on. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor.
Thanks, Megan. By the way, this is Megan's, she's not leaving the city, she's just advancing to another position. Last ResiStat meeting. How many of these have you done, Megan?
This is the 84th.
You are the 84th. Let's give her a round of applause. She loved it so much, she moved here a few years ago. I have one other hand-raising question. Who went to the wrong location tonight instead of the Tab building? I'm not the only idiot in the room, Captain. It's me and you and a few others. Well, it's good to have some company. Before I get started and lay out some context for tonight's conversation, off script briefly, I'd like to ask the vice chairperson of the school committee, your Ward 7 school committee woman, Carrie Normand, just to come up and give you a heads up. There's something important that's going on in the city. I know some of us have kids in the school, some of us have grandkids, some of us don't. But what's happening in the school system is really, it's magical right now, and there's some important community work going on that we want to make sure you're tuned into and we have you engaged with.
Thank you. I'll be super brief. There's so much. I have a freshman and a senior at the high school, and even in construction, it is an amazing school. But we are doing a very big visioning process. Things are going great, but we want them to be better, and we want to take advantage of our whole dynamic Somerville community. So we're right now doing Visioning 2030, and it's what do we want for kids? How do we want them to participate in the community? What do we want for schools? What kind of learning experiences? And we want input not just from parents, but from residents, from kids. We're going into the middle schools and talking to them, and the high schools. I have some cards in English, some in Spanish that have a website, very quick questionnaire, and we really, really do want input from people who volunteer in the schools, who participate, and just what kind of community do we want that's a learning community, not just for kids, but also for adults. And we're looking to get as much input. We're through the winter, we're extending it. We really want it. We've got hundreds of responses, but we're looking for more. And I think that's sort of it. I mean, I could.
Some informational cards.
Yeah, I've got.
To get engaged, give
Yeah.
us your input and comments. It's really important. We laid out in summer vision. I'll talk about that. Remind everybody about that a little while ago. This is a deep dive in terms of visioning for the schools, in terms of what kind of school system we want.
And also beyond too. I mean, we're looking at all kids. We're looking at our kids who go to private schools, go to parochial schools. We're looking at our homeschoolers. We're looking for the students who are here for their lifetime, students who transition in and out. Really, how do we want to raise our youth in a very broad way? So, and I'm happy to talk more about it afterwards, but I'm going to give it back to Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. There is a lot of stuff going on. And if it seems like there's construction everywhere, frankly, there is. And, I'm reminded of that impact on us daily as I take my kids to and from their school. I'm around the city at different events. I try to come here, and as I'm heading to the West Somerville, because I forget the meeting's here, that adds an extra 10 minutes to my commute here. I want to say before I have this conversation to all of you, sincerely, I'm very sorry. And I want to apologize for the inconvenience we're all enduring. The disturbance, the stress as you traverse the city or try to get to work or enjoy everyday life. I know we're all bought into what's going to be like on the other side, and it will be transformative in terms of our quality of life, but getting there is complex. And as we go through this conversation, we want to reassure you that, look, we're side by side with you on this. We live it every day, breathe every day. We're putting a lot of resources to measure the impacts, to mitigate it. I'm not going to sit or stand here and sugarcoat it. There are no great ideas, just ideas to manage the bad situations moving forward, but we're going to get there. But I just want to remind us and get us excited about why we're doing this, because we are literally doing 50 years worth of infrastructure work in the city in the next 3 to 5. This is in a region that's the 6th most congested region in the United States, and Somerville is not immune to that. We were a city that when we decided, as many communities did, to get rid of all our rail and trolley stops mid-century, we had about 20, we started planning a city for cars and not people. If you plan a city for cars, that's what you're going to get. We changed that several years. We've made it bold, put a bold stake in the ground that we're going to plan for the human scale, for people. We have bold mobility goals and sustainability goals. To get there is not easy. And as I go through this, the context is infrastructure, the improvements of infrastructure, below ground, above ground, is the critical thread that sews everything together. At the same time, there's many other types of projects going on that impact us. So I want to give a little context. Yeah, there's a lot going on. This illustrates just in the last few years in terms of streetscape and pipe work, sewer drain, water mains, and so forth. You can see just from 2015 to now, a really exponential increase in that and this type of activity. I mean, it's happening everywhere around the city. So whether it's the basic water work improvements we're doing down on Pearl Street, you may have seen that if you're on the east side of the city, or the Green Line extension, which I'll talk about why we're excited. This has finally happened, but the delay, the recalibration of the latest timeline. And by the way, this is the last time I'm going to talk about Green Line, because it's in terms of once it's open, it'll be done. It's actually going to happen. 2 years from now, we will be testing cars on the new line for a full implementation and operation by about March, April 2021. So 2020 this time, they're testing the rail. It's exciting. It's going to happen. But that's happening. It should have been done in 2018. Right now, we should have been full implementation. Because it's not, it's on top of everything else. It compounds it. So whether it's that, the deep, really subterranean water pipe, big pipe work happening on Somerville Ave East from the Middle Union Square East to McGrath Highway, McCarthy Overpass, and Brick Bottom, and the streetscape improvements there. Carrie mentioned the Somerville High School project, which is a vertical construction project, or even just the improvements in the West Branch Library. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and that doesn't even, these are just public projects, whether it's the city or the state or federal funded. It's not even in a snapshot of that, albeit. And it doesn't even include the private work, like the hotel that will get built in Teele Square, or the one that's going up on Beacon Street, or the other private development work in the major transformative areas of the city, or what's happening on our boundaries in our other cities and towns. You know, we're 4.1 square miles, the most densely populated city in New England. Something happens here on the west side, the east side, we all feel it. I think we understand that. Little history, and we usually give you a lot of operational data. The data here, for when I'm going to lay out, is more historical, for you to noodle as we go into conversations about particular projects. This is when, you know, late 1800s, Somerville became Somerville in 1842, 1872. Then we were a city, but the late 1800s, that's when we started building the major infrastructure below ground. That's when we started building the majority of our housing stock up until about mid-century. We stopped investing, really, in that time. We have pipes in the city that go back to that time period, still in place, still shaped in brick. And they're built at that time with a life sort of expectancy of about 100 years. That doesn't mean they're all going to start collapsing in 100 years, although some have. But there has been very little of major investment there over time, and we've put a lot towards, and we'll talk about investing in preventive maintenance, and these type of assets, and all assets, and major pipe, not just restoration, but replacement across the city to meet some of our sustainability and infrastructure goals. But that should give you a really important snapshot, and this is critical. And the pipes we are putting into place now, you know, really have more of a life expectancy of 50 years, but the techniques, as you hear from engineers about how you restore and treat the pipes and do preventive maintenance, have advanced greatly over this time period. You know, when we think about the infrastructure work, it's not only we know why we want to do it, we have to think of how we pay for it. This is major investment in the city, the likes we've never done before, but we are excited. We brought in hundreds of millions of dollars, actually billions of dollars worth of infrastructure money from a variety of sources. You know, so whether it's money coming from housing and urban development for the federal government, the federal transportation money that comes through the regional planning organizations like the Boston MPO. So, you know, any, you know, Green Line money comes through the MPO. Major work that does some of our major streetscapes, like Beacon Street, comes through the MPO, and other state and federal grants, or if it's money that matches us, local taxpayer money at the school, for the Massachusetts School Building Authority. About 50% of that came from the MSBA. The rest came from the debt exclusion. Thank you as voters for coming out and to vote for that. An important project for our kids and our future. Or the yearly allocation we get from the Commonwealth just to improve streets and sidewalks, which I will readily admit is not enough of them, what we supplement and leverage against our other city in tax dollars. There's a lot of money being invested in infrastructure. And we think about where we're going to invest that money. Now we have major goals we'll talk about in a second, major development projects. That infrastructure needs to be put in place to unlock that investment and the benefits back to the city, major sustainability environmental goals. And then it's really, you know, how we prioritize just, you know, the maintenance of our assets. You know, which streets are we going to totally rip up down to the dirt and build back up? Which streets are going to be a total transformation and skinning down the roadway, enhancing bikeability, walkability, mitigating traffic like on Beacon Street and other areas like we're going to be doing across the city? Where do we need to do basic preventive maintenance? We came into office about 15 years ago. There was no methodology. In most cities, a lot more have it now. Many don't. They'd look at streets and say, you know, that one looks pretty bad. We should do that one over. And here, and it was really just picking the low-hanging fruit. But there is a lost opportunity in that because of what we've analyzed, and it's been proven by different analyses and studies over time. If we make the right type of investment in preventive maintenance, we're going to save 7 times as much money on our streets rather than bring it down to the very base, down to the very dirt. So we have a grade on all our sidewalks and streets across the city that aren't major transformation projects like a Beacon, like we're doing on Somerville Ave. And the streets around the city, we have them on a schedule in terms of their condition in that grade and when they're going to happen. Some of you have come to us and say, wow, my street's not getting done for 5 years. I'm concerned. We are looking at that grading system now because with the congestion, which in this region is not dissipating, the deterioration of these assets is happening at a greater rate. So our schedule will be recalibrated. So a street, for example, that we may be doing 5 years now might be advanced to 3 or 4. We're looking at the entire grade, but we have that. It's up on the website for you. It's really important. But we use data on a real-time basis to understand we're going to do preventive maintenance. We're going to use our tax dollars and resources wisely. We're going to allocate them more appropriately. The infrastructure projects, why are we doing them? Well, sometimes the road's broken. Obviously, we're going to fix it. But there are important community values and goals we're trying to achieve. Summer Vision is, as if you recall, and if you don't know, I'll tell you, is the city's comprehensive long-term plan for the future. Several years ago, we adopted it and said, this is what we're going to be, aspire to be by 2030. We're going to be led by one oriented value to make Somerville an exceptional place to live, work, play, raise a family. And we had some critical goals along those way. We were going to build a certain number of housing units. Now, I'll tell you, some of these numbers are being re-examined. That was several years ago. We are in a housing emergency. You can bet these numbers will be pushed in some cases with the public's input, but we're going to build a certain amount of housing units, of which a significant portion will be permanently affordable. We had goals to increase development or growth around commercial development so we can alleviate over the long term the tax burden on the residential property taxpayer and still invest in critical core services like public safety, education, health, and so forth. We wanted to create a net new 30,000 jobs right at Tampa. We want to expand open space by 125 acres in the city. These are things we aspire to, but the one thing, again, that I'll tell you that is linked and sewn to that is the infrastructure to make sure that happens. So we even did a deeper dive in some of these areas in Summer Vision, you know, as part of our mobility goal that we had to shift all new vehicle trips by 50% to more biking, walking, public transportation, which is why we're making the investments to make the city more bikeable, more walkable, and bring in the Green Line extension so that 85% of the city will now be within a half-mile walking distance of a transit node. You know, Vision Zero, to make sure we completely eliminate any type of incident on a motor vehicle and pedestrian that results in serious injury or death, as well as our other sustainability goals or concentrated neighborhood redevelopment plans. Infrastructure is really critical. It lines all these particular concentrated goals to our overall goals and values laid out in Summer Vision. But as we may agree, that's critical to accomplish. That's where we want to go. We want to survive and alleviate as much stress, disruption to our lives, to our businesses as possible in this interim until we get to the other side. Again, I apologize because it is real. I know it, we see it, we hear from you, and we're keened into it. So we're trying to, again, look at everything at a project before it starts, as the work starts, that may impact us. Traffic congestion, noise, rodent abatement, which I'll talk about in a second as we move forward. Yep.
Sean Becker on Potter House, the unpaved, repaved portion. In the contracting process of the city-controlled projects, is there a mechanism where you can assess economic value to the duration, shortening the days or accelerating the project? I know that the trades are heavily booked in our streets have been under construction, not quite as long as Cedar Street, but for quite some time. And a lot of that seems to be lack of labor, lack of contracting ability to accelerate the works.
Sometimes, Brad, you had your hand up. Did you want to chime in? Because I'll add something to this.
Yeah, actually, Jess, you might want to chime in as well, right?
Yeah.
We've studied the impact of work hours and restrictions in terms of the way that our tax bills get impacted as clients. Is that what you're asking, Sean?
So are you able to, sometimes you extend a project to say 5%, but you don't evaluate the effect that has on extending a project 6 months on a major thoroughfare or for local businesses. The example would be ComAd Bridge versus what they're going to do with the Ball Square Bridge. I understand you don't control that project, but for other projects that the city does control.
Sure, yeah, there's Jess Bosbrad, Assistant Director of Engineering. There are various ways that we look at that. Oftentimes when we're going through the design process with the engineering consultant for these major construction projects, we look at what is the most realistic schedule that we can accomplish. Earlier this year and last year, we went through an extensive exercise to look at work hours as well. So if you restrict a contractor to only working 9 to 3, what can they accomplish versus working 7 to 3? And so that's something that's a huge time savings, more than just that 2 hours actually, because of how the contractor's days are booked. So if we do want to, for some reason, attempt to accelerate a project, we do work with an engineering design consultant to look at that before we put the project out to bid to the contractor, and that's when we're able to say, hey, here are your restrictions. That can significantly increase the price though. So it's something that we can take into the balance in the planning phases of a project. But one can have significant cost increases, and construction bids are high these days. We're seeing it across the board in various types of construction, both horizontal and vertical. due to all of the various projects going on in the region.
I mean, as a starting point, and I think everybody could agree, we want to get to a project as quickly as possible, and we're willing to be flexible in that project, even if it means a little disruption in our lives to get in and out of here and not have them extend over a few construction seasons. Some of the things that, some of the variables that impact that one is who controls the contract. Is it a city contract or a state contract? On Beacon Street, even though there was some city money, there was sort of a mix of city, federal, state money, it was a state contract, and yet a contract, and we're going to be finishing in our third construction season next year, and it's been like getting your tooth pulled over a weekend, and so it's been complex. The Green Line is also different because the procurement mechanism design is called maximum price design build. There's a maximum price on the contract, and the contractors in the field, with the design teams, and they're making decisions. Like when we had the question about Ball Square Bridge, who knew about this? It's January, and someone said, well, no, now it's February, March. You're right. And things can move. Like the Holman's building was going to come down in the summer, then it was going to be September, and it was going to be January. Now it's going to come down this summer because they figured some things out on the field, which actually the greater flexibility we get, the better we have on the price. That doesn't always work out for us and the community. So it all depends really, and for us in terms of the city, to spend a little bit more. If it means more convenience, we're happy to do that, unless it blows the whole contract up and we just don't have that funding. Some of the things that compound the project and these major infrastructure works, is it a city only, or is it a mix of a blend of state and federal other contracts on top of it? Even if the city controls the contract, if we have a major state grant on that, example would be Somerville Ave East, city contractor, we got a $13 million Mass Works grant on that, and if you don't burn it at the rate that you're going to get, if you don't spend the money at the rate in their schedule, then we're going to be covering millions of dollars. So that's when it becomes complex. So I hope that kind of answers it. We'd like to get in and out of here as fast as possible. To start. So we understand these things. We are looking at them. One of the things I would say, if you haven't done this, I read this all the time, there is a very accurate real-time update that you get. If you take a look at construction at somervillema.gov, I believe it's in some of the handouts, you can sign up for this alert. It is accurate. And the Board of Aldermen has worked closely with us on that. We want to thank the President of the Board for helping us with the investment in 3 critical projects, 3 critical positions to assist us engagement, communication, and information dissemination. Erica Mace is the Construction Public Information Officer. I don't know if these folks are here. Is Erica? Erica's in the back of the room waving her hand. Jesse Moose is the Construction Liaison and Compliance Manager. Jesse, you here? I saw him earlier. He's been at all of them. We'll get him for that. And then Viola, I know Viola Augustin, she's the GLX project liaison. These people are in the field daily, real time, working with businesses, neighborhood groups out there, checking in information, working with the different, cross over amongst the many projects you see, whether it's, because we're staging, for example, in Gilman Square and Highland Avenue School, you got the high school vertical project, and then you've got the Green Line project. And then the Holman's building is going to come down. It might be part of the Green Line. You can treat it as a separate project. How are we all talking to each other, communicating and coordinating shutdowns and disruptions and so forth? So these folks are here. I implore you to take a look at this, sign this up. It's another important piece of information. Living through this is critical. The other impacts we look at every day right now, an important one that we will always measure is rodents, rats. One of the things the President and I never thought we'd have to know more about than most other topics. We learned over the years, and we established a rodent advisory committee. This is important, folks. Who has had to deal with a rodent infestation in their neighborhood? I'm surprised you're sure. Well, let me tell you, the rats are here. They're not going away. The question is, how many of them are going to allow to stay in the city with us? And I say that because we're not going to eliminate an entire species. It's here. They've always been here. But it is important. And it's a disruption. It's stressful to see a rat in your yard. And what little history here going back several years ago when we had like sort of the all-time reportings of rodents in the region and most urban areas around the country. I'll tell you right now, climate change is an important an exacerbating variable in this. The more mild the winters, the reports and the sightings of rodents and rats increase exponentially. We've seen that adjust with the weather. We also saw some other things that learned over time, and I'll get to the construction relative point here. Cutting off the food source and water source diminishes the population. So the water source, if you have a pet in your home, like I have 2 dogs, you get that water bowl or a cat in the backyard, take the water, put it in the tree well or the plant, because the water source is, they'll be at the water at night. We, at this point, you see, this was a statistically significant decrease in the reportings or sightings because that is when the board approved the city. They worked with them. We went to a unified trash bin or container for your trash. That's the more hardened container. So we cut off a food source. At the same time, with our inspectional services department, we studied and analyzed how we were permitting dumpsters. And we found we were permitting dumpsters that were actually corroding and had holes in them. There were another food source. So those two things, and it might have been aided by a little colder winter, but those two things had a significant, statistically significant impact on the number of sightings. So we are tracking this because in the construction, what is relevant about the construction is there's going to be disruption in the field. And if you disrupt the nest, rodents, they're being displaced to other areas in Somerville. And it's usually, you know, if you see a rodent in your yard, your house probably isn't the problem, but they're emanating from somewhere. In one property, the range of infestation will be pretty broad. We'll all see it. So what's important for us is, what's always aided, we say, you're reporting to it, calling 311, or doing it via email. Or on social media. Even if you think you saw the same rat 5 times, we'll take 5 calls because we do pay attention to this. And we have a strategy, and we're being advised. I talk about our expert and others who advise us. You know, we see here, this is a heat map, just from comparison, you know, March to September, 17 to 18, the calls that have come in. And the deeper red areas, certainly the higher concentration of calls. Down in 10 Hills, that was my neighborhood. We have a problem. We thought it was a home. Actually, we think we found out something coming off the river and off the slope that nobody pays attention to onto the Fellsway. It takes one concentrated area in the entire neighborhood gets affected. But in certain parts of the southeastern areas of the city or along the rail bed, we've had a lot of infestation. In the rail bed, we find that there are a lot of nests. I know if this is kind of gross, you know, but it's important. We actually had the most renowned rat scientist in the nation employed now by the city of Somerville. We really want to know, you know, how our policies work. You can't just trap your way out of this problem. And they're not always in the source, because quite honestly, you're getting takeout in the source and you got a buffet up top. You know, it's really, you know, understanding the conditions in the neighborhood, you know, that allow the environment for rodent infestation. Dr. Corrigan actually has come through the corridor, the different infrastructure areas in Union Square, and through the Green Line corridor, advising us. And a lot of the slopes that were, you know, you've seen where they took out some trees, and there were also these ties holding the slopes in, and there were nests in there. But we know when we are doing work in that corridor, these other infrastructure projects, something's going to get disturbed, and then we're going to get heavier calls of infestation in certain neighborhoods. So we're trying to understand how our work, how we can do preventive work, informational work, educating homeowners, property owners about what to do in their yards, what programs the city has to take advantage of. So this is one of the disruptive issues we're paying close attention to because it is serious. The other one is, yes, sir, sorry. Yes, do we know how these numbers compare to other cities? We do have on the rodent calls and other calls. We have some comparative data. I don't have that now. I know this because there was I forget if it was Governing magazine or someone wrote about this, our interventions compared to Boston at the same time. Usually the increases, the spikes are pretty consistent in the region. Ours was deemed statistically significant. It was a greater and more significant drop than Boston seeing around this timetable. Maybe what we can do, Megan, is get it out to the group. I know that chart's there because Dan Hadley, I think it was Governing or someone who wrote about it. So we have some of that comparative data for this and other and other matters as well. If you let us know the types of topics for this, and as we move to future meetings, you want to see compared to Boston, Cambridge, and other cities, maybe other metro areas in the country, we do have some of that information. Just to the other part of what this disturbs us, whether we're a business owner or not, because these are the places we're going to frequent. I do 99%, my wife and I'm local as much as I can. A restaurant, get my hair cut, whatever we need to do, we're here. And I see many of you in those different areas. How we get to these business establishments is important for us, for our services, but also for them. Now, all the studies show that when you increase your bike and walk score, and the investment in public transportation will greatly benefit the bottom line of these local businesses. Some of those local businesses we're very proud of because there's so many of them are independently, locally owned or managed, especially at the restaurant scene. You don't see that a lot of places. We know there's been a great benefit. You know, most of them employ, again, 20 employees or less, but the studies also show that they do take a hit, and we know that. We're recognizing they do take a hit especially during the height of this construction and inconvenience, when you get bridge closures or roads closed, we are working closely with them in our Office of Strategic Planning, Community Development. It's Economic Development Division. We're providing a ton of small business support. We're doing a lot of outreach with the new personnel and staff we have. We're working with the Chamber and some of the Local First and the Main Streets organizations. We're doing a lot, not just to promote individual businesses, but also reminding people about these are places, still doing placemaking in places like Ball Square. Even though, we had the Ball and Ball Square celebration, we're doing a lot of events to remind people these are destinations, even during construction. We're doing a lot of things to promote to the outside world that if you're not coming here to these neighborhoods as destinations, you should probably go somewhere else. 85% of the traffic that comes through Somerville is cut-through traffic. So we're going to be investing in public service announcements, much like they did, someone mentioned Com Ave. I think there's some interesting PSAs, and I think with all the PSAs, and some of them had a lot of lighthearted or comical. I don't know how they measure, but they claim it was a 40% reduction in sort of the pass-through traffic. Public service announcement. I know you know that. Public service announcement. So whether it's me, one of us up on the television saying, "Don't come here. It's gonna be really bad," unless you're shopping in Ball, or unless you're shopping in Davis or Teele. We really want to promote the destinations. We're going to do a lot of education because it is majority cut-through traffic. But at the same time, we're going to make sure our businesses are sustained, they thrive, and we hit the other side of this turbulent time period of inconvenience. We are off and running. But we want to get, again, a Loyal to Local campaign. We invite you to take a look at hashtag Loyal to Local on social media, spread the awareness, asking people to continue to shop local, frequent those places, and we're working with all those business districts in terms of logistics, how we're going to handle different transportation concerns, access concerns, and so forth. It's not going to be easy for them as well. So that is my presentation. Some historical data is meant to give you context as we go to specific projects of Ward 7, remind us or acclimate ourselves to why we're doing this, the importance in terms of community values and other critical objectives for the city. I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here for the whole night. Happy to talk to you one-on-one. Did anybody have a couple for me before I step back? Yes, Jessica.
What's going on with the North Street Powerhouse intersection? Because Katjana knows we've been having severe issues with pedestrian crossing with students going to school in the morning and in the afternoon. And I've requested assistance from the Somerville Police Department or just give the crossing guard signs or, those, what are they, the things you put in the middle of
The pedestrian crosswalk. Yep. Yeah, so the question is, and Captain in the back and Brad, what are we doing to address the concerns around the North Street, Powder House Boulevard intersection, especially since we have young kids, children, families, students around there. We know this area very well. The queuing is pretty bad there in the morning, as well as some of the speed and the way that intersection is disrupted. Did you have an answer for that now? And I think Captain Donovan might have in terms of enforcement now. Mike Tremblay will just give you an answer. He's from our Transportation Division.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to be speaking a bit more about other stuff after this, but I'm Mike Tremblay, Senior Transportation Planner. As you guys might know, we actually count pedestrians and bicycles every fall, and I counted a few intersections this year, and one of them was this intersection, Powder House at North Street, and I observed firsthand for an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon about just how this intersection operates, and yeah, it's not exactly optimal. So one thing I've been looking into is actually whether that signal is even warranted. There's specific warrants for whether a signal is needed at an intersection, and usually that means the number of vehicles going through at peak hour or over the course of a day, or pedestrians crossing there. And I found that it's actually right on the cusp of actually being needed. I think one of the biggest benefits of that signal is that it allows school children to cross the street and get up to the West Somerville neighborhood school, so I would be hesitant to remove that signal. But it's something that we're thinking about. I think one of the biggest things I've taken away within that is that it seems like the most issues happen when North Street has cleared out and the light's still green on North Street, but Powder House backs up, and then there's some aggressive movements to get through the light. So I think it's worth looking into. That signal itself is very old, so we're looking into improving all of our traffic signals in the city. I think that's one that we should prioritize in terms of upgrading, maybe adding a left turn phase for Powder House Boulevard in a certain direction. So it's certainly on our radar, and we're looking into it.
Like, what about the bump outs that you designed that the contractor will build?
Yeah, so as part of the ongoing repaving project, we are actually going to be building a couple bump outs on the west side of the intersection, one large one on the northwest side of the intersection, which will really help force vehicles to slow down as they make turns there, and as well as reduce the crossing lengths for pedestrians and make things a little bit tighter out there, which slows cars down.
Can I just add though, I mean, Jim has been here, he's sort of been involved in this. There's been an uptick in traffic through that intersection, so I did reach out to the captain, and if you could just share what you guys sort of.
I can tell you, I probably talked to Katjana more than I talked to my wife. Via text, email, calls. She drives by my house in Medford. She knows where I live. We're working together. We're trying, Katjana asked me to address some things on the police side, and we're doing enforcement. We're beefing up our enforcement at the intersection of North and Powder House. With the construction there, I think there's a lot of times perceptionist cars are moving faster as well. It's loud, there are plates there. I drive through there myself a few times a day, but we are beefing up our enforcement there. I've asked the traffic bureau to do some work down there. That's educational. It's not a permanent solution. And Katjana also asked for some enforcement, just on potholes in general approaching the school from Route 16. As you know, Route 16 is a state highway. The speed limit is significantly higher than our streets in Somerville, thank God. But you do have those cars coming off Route 16, so they are coming at a different rate of speed. So we are increasing our enforcement. We're working with Brad and his people, who are phenomenal, about doing some engineering changes too. So that should help.
I appreciate the feedback. However, the experience every morning, I walk my kids to school every morning. The bump outs, I think, is a great idea, but we don't go crosswalk to crosswalk. We go diagonal across the street. So the bump outs are not cutting any of our distance between corner to corner at all. The light is broken there. The old one, the green is like half gone, the yellow doesn't work, and the red is functioning for now. But this is a serious issue. Even when the light is red, people are still driving through it. They're turning right on red, and we've had several occasions, which is seriously like a daily basis, where children are this close from being hit. Thank God for our crossing guard, because he jumps in front of them. However, he shouldn't have to do that. And I feel like I've made a lot of noise about it. Like it should be taken very seriously, because if it happens to be one of my children that are hit, I'm not going to be a happy mother, or any other person in the community is not going to be happy. Cyclists, same thing. They try to cross the street, they get the same issues. This is a morning issue to school and an afternoon issue from school. It's not something that needs, like, studying. You need to take action now.
Well, as far as the traffic signals, I can reach out to traffic and parking this week or beginning next week and have fix the light signals, make sure the signals are working as well. As far as the bump outs, Brad and Mike can speak to that. The bump outs, I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are traffic calming devices, not necessarily to decrease your crossing side. So what the studies have shown, and I don't want to speak, you guys are professionals, the studies have shown that the bump outs slow cars. I'll let you speak to it.
And reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians, which is a bigger deal. And actually, the biggest threat to crossing pedestrians is the speed at which cars can make turns, right? So if you're not expecting a car to make a turn and they can do that turn at 40 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour as opposed to 10 or 15, that's what puts pedestrians in danger there. So that's the idea behind the bump outs.
So one thing I'll follow up with the captain as chief is just trying to beef up the presence at those times with the officer. As we try to deal longer term, in the interim and longer term, on some of the other infrastructure and signalization improvements, but have the physical presence there. But we'll talk about the crosswalk issue as well. On the side, I want to hear a little bit more. We'll talk to some of the engineers on that. I'm going to step back because I'm getting yelled at. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to listen to everybody else's comments as we go through the Ward 7 projects. Who's taking this one? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your other comments.
So up next is Jess Fosbrook from our engineering department. While she makes her way up here, I just wanted to mention two other projects that not in Ward 7 but may affect some of you. Any West Branch Library fans here? Yeah. So if you haven't heard, Saturday the 17th is going to be their last day on College Ave for a couple of years while renovations happen. So Saturday, they're going to be having a kind of block party, open house, send off for the building, so stop by. And then over the next couple of weeks, they're going to be moving stuff out. And on December 3rd, they're going to be opening a small temporary branch right here in the Tab building. So you're going to be able to do some of the things like drop off books, check out books that you've put on hold. I think they will have a small selection of books here and some programming. They're still kind of working out what the hours and what programs are going to be offered here, so stay tuned for more on that. The other one, one of the questions the alderman asked was who goes through Union Square, and I'm guessing the reason she asked that is that there is about to be a pretty major detour going in, and this is my neighborhood, so I am ramping up for some traffic delays. But depending on, there's some Eversource work that needs to wrap up, and then once that's done, there's going to be basically the center of the square is going to be shut down for about 6 months. So there are going to be some detours. If you commute through Union Square, I would definitely suggest that you sign up for that construction email that the mayor mentioned. You'll get weekly updates about what's going on with that project. Also, on the city website, we have maps of the proposed detours and more information about that project. So if you need to start thinking about planning a different route, you can do that. And now I'll hand it over to Jess.
Thank you, Megan. Again, I'm Jess Fosbrook, Assistant Director of Engineering. Just to touch upon Union Square a little bit more, we do have a major piece of work where we're actually connecting the pipes that flow 60% of the city's stormwater. So the stormwater going through Davis goes down to Union. There will be a major detour for about 6 months. Many of the moves through the square are maintained. Access to all the businesses is maintained. Just coming from Somerville Ave eastbound, so if you're going past Market Basket towards the square, that's kind of the main one that you won't be able to continue through the square. You'll be able to go Somerville Ave, loop back up to Bow Street, so continue to shop and eat and whatnot in Union Square through the holiday season, but we will be routing people down Dane Street to Washington to continue through the square. But yeah, please go to the website and check that out for a little bit more information. I did just want to briefly follow up to the gentleman's question about construction, scheduling, and whatnot. Agree with everything the mayor said. And I wanted to add that a lot of times we are now doing multiple projects within a project. The community path that I'm going to talk about next is an example of doing 2 or 3 projects at once. So we're trying to take a look at as much of the old and aging infrastructure we can. If we're, say, opening up a street for a water main upgrade, is there a sewer upgrade? Do we need to get in touch with Eversource for some of their upgrades? So that enables us to upgrade a lot of things at once and hopefully not come back anytime soon to those locations, but would impact our ability, for instance, to accelerate a single schedule of a project. But one of the many factors that we do balance. All right, so in your backyard, the community path, we appreciate your patience. For those of you that run, walk, bike, use the community path, hang out. We have been doing 2 things. We've been doing some upgrades to the retaining wall along the backside of a number of properties that border the community path, and we've been actually connecting the drainage from the path into Thorndike Street. It previously was not connected, and hence Lake Somerville that would often show up in even seemingly minor rainstorms. So that has the drainage portion is wrapping up. This is a picture of one of the catch basins that went into Thorndike Street. So we did about 600 feet of storm drain improvements within the path, and then we are lining about 130 feet of existing storm drain in Thorndike Street. so that pipe will be able to have a functioning lifespan for much longer, in addition to now. So yeah, just a picture of the retaining wall as well. So we are looking to have the path reopened shortly after Thanksgiving. So it will be back open through the winter. And then we are actually coming back in the spring to do a top coat. We'll have a perfectly good paved service for everyone to use through the winter. Additional top coat in May or June, so that'll be around 6 weeks or so that we will need to shut down the path again. And we are looking into planting around 5 trees. So one of the complications of working in this area of the path is that it is over the red line tunnel, so we have to be mindful of working with the MBTA and restrictions on top of working on a functioning subway tunnel on top of it. So appreciate your patience with the closures, and look forward to having this wrapped up soon with some final paving happening in the spring. Oh, sorry, that's it for me. I can take a couple questions now if anyone has any. All right. Pass it back to Mike.
Thanks, Jess. Oops. So I've seen a few familiar faces here from our meeting last month up at the West Somerville Neighborhood School about Powderhouse Boulevard. I want to give you a quick update on that project. As those of you who use that street a lot probably know, the street is sort of in a state of half completion in terms of the new pavement. So my understanding is that given the gas work that was necessary on the street and the emergency work that the gas company had to do up in the Merrimack Valley delayed the project a little bit. So we're not going to see a full completion this construction season, which shouldn't surprise anybody that the construction season is practically over at this point, considering we're going to get a few inches of snow tonight. But unfortunately, that'll be wrapping up in the spring, so that you'll see the sidewalks that haven't been done yet and the pavement that hasn't been done yet, as well as the striping, all get done in the spring. So you'll see a new bike lane on the uphill side of the street. So if you're riding from Route 16, you'll have a bike lane going towards Curtis Street, and then same thing if you're going from the Rotary, you'll have a bike lane going towards Curtis Street and the Sharrow in the opposite direction. And the reason we do that is because bikes are slower going uphill. So, if you're riding with traffic, you don't want to be, holding up traffic behind you if you're going uphill. And then after that, we're going to be implementing some permanent traffic calming measures around the West Somerville Neighborhood School. We're still working out exactly what those are, but we are actively working on what kinds of improvements we can have there. That might include a change in the pedestrian signal there, raised crosswalks, things like that. In the short term, however, I'll get to your question in just a second. We wanted to make some things, once it became clear that this section wasn't being paved this year, we wanted to make some changes so that we could go through the rest of this school year, or at least through the winter, with some improved safety near the school. So I believe just 2 weeks ago or so, we painted a new crosswalk, completing that triangle right at the school there. We also formalized the fire lanes there, which kind of look like painted bump outs, so that it visually now narrows the travel lane approaching those crosswalks. The idea there is to just try and get traffic to go a little bit slower going through those crosswalks there. We're also, I think, literally this week doing a speed study to test how those things have affected traffic. We've seen some positive results in terms of just paint on the road positively affecting driver speeds. So we're hoping that we get a mile an hour or two reduction in traffic speeds as a result of those improvements. For your reference, 85% or so of vehicles traveling through that area go 31 miles an hour, which is about 6 miles an hour too high, and probably a little bit higher than that. So, and as you guys may know, we have a flashing beacon here, which you can see in this picture at the very top corner, and it's mounted a little bit too high. We noticed that. So we're working with DPW to lower that so that it's more visible for vehicles. Any questions on Powderhouse? Sir?
Is there going to be any aggressive pothole patrol since there are already plenty of traffic calming measures currently installed?
The question was about potholes. As always, please be diligent in terms of contacting 311 to patch those up. while they are traffic calming, they can also bust your rim in your car pretty good. So we do want to make sure we're not causing damage to anybody's car or bike or whatever. So while they can be effective slowing cars down, it's not the best way to do it. Sir?
Yes, I live on Conwell Avenue, and there were many days during July, August, and September where Powder House Boulevard, one lane was closed off on 4th Street and Curtis Street, and all the cars were going up Conwell Avenue, which is actually 2 blocks over. But the cars come up, they saw one lane was closed, they went over to Raymond, and they see that's restricted because of the school, and then in frustration and with their foot on the pedal, they raced up Conwell Avenue. And I just even today I was walking past that and I saw there was the big sign with that one lane was closed. And I walked down to the schoolhouse and I couldn't see any construction going on anywhere. And I just wanted to say that that's a really big issue because Conwell Avenue is narrow and that amount of traffic is very disruptive.
Thank you. I hadn't been aware of that, so if it's still an issue, I can follow up and make sure that if that sign is not accurate, which it seems like it isn't accurate, then we should make sure that it's right. And it seems like it's been there for a while and it's no longer accurate, or
no, and it gets put up during the summertime. EverSource was very clearly working on that, but they could have hired somebody to go and direct traffic, so you have traffic going in both directions. But instead, for not hiring somebody, they just closed off one lane and let the cars figure it out themselves.
Yeah, and I will say that the police department does a great job in terms of staffing our police details. However, one of the side effects of having so much construction is that sometimes we have trouble filling those police details. So, we offer this, overtime pay for police officers, but there's just literally so much work happening that sometimes that's an issue, and sometimes that means either, work can't happen or EverSource or whoever else has to improvise. So. I realize that's not an ideal situation, but we're trying the best we can to hire more officers as well as to kind of make it easier to fill those details.
Maybe that's a case where you don't need an officer if none's available.
Yeah. One more on this.
Today was the worst. I live on High Street, and the cars, they don't come only from the North Street. Everything was parking going to High Street, but they coming from the side of Somerville and from the other side of the North Street, and those all the way from the bottom to the top. And the ones when it's like slow, when they have less cars, ones coming from the top, they speed up like probably 35, 40. I've never seen anything like that. And that's the same thing that I would say. They should have the police controlling, because I never see the speed of coming at the cars. If it is full up to the top, they have to stop. But if they see just the bottom, they accelerate, and then it's so dangerous what I see. And today was all the way from the bottom and stop on the top. That was coming from both sides. Today I never seen as today.
Right. Yeah, and I will thank you for that feedback. I will remind people, if there is an issue that's persisting, please do contact 311, because there's always a chance that we're not aware of it, and we should be. So there's a bystander syndrome of possibility happening here. So please just let us know. We may have heard it already, but that we may not have. So I'm going to move on to who here loves Powder House Circle? Just me and Megan. This thing. We are considering some changes to this beautiful rotary as partly because of the Broadway bridge closure, but also because it quite frankly doesn't work and never has, in my opinion. Here's kind of a list of things that I've observed about the rotary that I think make it not really function as it should. And this probably isn't an exhaustive list. There's probably a bunch of other things here. But the first issue that I've found is that there are crosswalks that go into the middle of the rotary, which might make things a little bit easier for pedestrians, maybe knock 30 seconds to a minute off of the time it takes to go from Broadway, Central Broadway over to Powder House Boulevard or to West Broadway. However, no traffic circle or roundabout or rotary, with the possible exception of, I think, Sweetser Circle in Everett, or Santilli Circle in Everett, has crosswalks into the middle. I might not be right about that either. It just doesn't. It means that the rotary doesn't work as a rotary. It means it's sort of a hybrid of a traffic signal and a rotary or a roundabout. So that's the big thing. And in addition to the crosswalks, you also have the red lights that come on to allow people to cross the street, which means now you're talking about like a signalized rotary, which again, very rare, and there's a reason why that's rare. So there's also just a general lack of guidance, right? If you're in this section, or if you're in this section, it's very hard to tell if the person next to you is exiting or not. Is it 1 lane? Is it 5 lanes? It's hard to tell sometimes. Typically, you wouldn't have legs of intersections come in so close to one another, or this far apart from one another. We have a beautiful park here in Nathan Tufts Park, but it means that you do have kind of skewed intersections in this rotary that you might not see in a typical roundabout. So unfortunately, that's probably not something we can change in a dramatic way, because we're not plowing through the park here or knocking down the funeral home or anything like that. But we kind of had to live with these dimensions, but maybe there's a way we can more gracefully make those things work. I also wanted to point out that it's a high crash cluster. So the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, and MassDOT classify intersections based on the number of crashes as well as the severity of the crashes. And this intersection is a high crash cluster in terms of the number of general crashes as well as for bicycles. So it's really a focus point for us, and I think we need to consider some changes here. So this is a concept that we have a consultant working on. It's a first draft, so please don't consider the fact we're going to be painting this tomorrow. But I think the very first thing that we need to consider is removing these crosswalks and bagging the lights or removing the lights there, which will help make the rotary function as a typical rotary, which again is kind of a 4-letter word in Massachusetts sometimes, the word rotary, but again, it would function a little bit better than it does now. In the interim, we could consider how to add these markings that you see here or something similar that would organize traffic before you enter the rotary in a way that is predictable. So for example, if you enter from Central Broadway into this left turn lane, you are staying in the rotary until this decision point, as opposed to changing lanes in an unpredictable way. So that's something that we are working through with a consultant. We will have more meetings on this before we think of any kind of changes here, but that's something we're thinking about. And then the long-term redesign could look like a beefier version of this with more curbs and things like that, or it could be something completely different. We haven't gotten that far yet. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we're thinking about this, and I wanted to gauge your reaction. I like the applause, but also let me know if there's anything I haven't considered here. So you guys have lived here longer than I have. So any questions or ideas about this?
I just would say the one thing about that rotary, the wonderful old signage in the middle of it. Yeah. And I don't know what to do about that, but it really is special. And so just keep that in the somehow.
Honestly, that's the reason you go in there, right?
Exactly.
So the gentleman mentioned the signage, which I believe is like a wayfinding signage to all the different towns in the area. Yeah. I think that kind of thing could work if you just moved it over to the Tufts Park. Right. Those arrows aren't exactly. Right. It's not geographically completely accurate, right? So I think that we could find a good home for there in Nathan Tufts Park or elsewhere. So that's something we can consider. We have historical preservation folks in our office that can help us out with that kind of thing. One more, sir?
You mentioned getting rid of the crosswalks. Is that something you can do on an interim basis with a bunch of black paint sooner than that?
Yeah, so I ordered these I ordered these changes in a progressive kind of, so this is the order of which we can do things. I think this is something we could do, if we got our ducks in a row and we got all buy-in from all the necessary parties, we could do that in the next, and this is a month's rather than years improvement. The middle one is probably a 1 to 2 years improvement. Again, depending on how the community process goes, how the design process goes, and then the full-scale redesign is, there's a lot of zeros in that price, so we have to figure out how to fund that and all those things. So this is probably the order in which we do it, and if we blacked out the crosswalks and bagged the signals and it didn't work, then we could put it back and try something new later. So I think there's a good progressive way we can go forward with this. So I have to move on, but I will be here. You can grab me and pull me outside to talk about more. I'm excited to dig into this kind of thing as well as to finish up the Powder House project. So thanks, everybody. Oh, I'm not done yet. Oh, Brad's going to talk about traffic calming and stuff, as well as Green Line extension. So,
Hi, everybody. Home stretch. Brad Rawson. I'm your neighbor. I'm a Ward 7 resident. I see many familiar faces. You folks have, been part of this community, part of this process. And one of the things I always say in ResiStat season is not every community does this. Not every community takes such pride in transparency, in open government, in access, making sure that management decisions and performance data are in your hands the same way that they're in our hands every day in the office. I live on West Adams Street, a couple blocks from here. My kid, who's just turned 3 last week, is going to start kindergarten at the West 2 years from now. And so we take great pride in being residents and public servants as well. We appreciate you guys coming out and donating your time to get plugged into civics, right? We're in a moment of national catastrophe. Local politics, local involvement and advocacy is how this country regenerates itself. So thank you for your time. I'm responsible for the transportation group in the mayor's office, but we also do public space. You folks have heard us talk about parks and urban forestry. The focus of tonight's session is really about life during construction. So, I'll be happy to talk parks or forestry issues offline afterwards, but we're going to try to get through, again, these kind of key issues of how we get through construction. So, it's always fun for me to see how animated and excited Mike gets. Mike's a former Somerville resident who lives just a block across the border into Arlington. Again, he experiences these streets every day. The mayor demands that we measure the effectiveness of our investments. And, a couple of folks, when we were at Powder House Boulevard meeting a couple of weeks ago with President Ballantyne, Alderman Rossetti, and others, were kind of poo-pooing some of these interventions that I want to talk quickly about. The cool thing is that our industry has recognized that $500, $1,000, $5,000 of paint and of signage can often slow cars down in a way that actually builds community support and builds a data record so that when we do ambitious things like tackling the Powder House Rotary, which frankly should have been done a generation or two ago, that we can actually defend those recommendations. So we prototype and we test, and then we're courageous enough to say if something hasn't worked in these tests. So ever so quickly, has anybody been to one of our most awesome new parks that we opened up this year, Hoyt Sullivan, over on Central Street by Rogers Foam and the Vernon Street Art Studios? A couple more days before it's just like the long, cold dark of winter, folks. Do yourselves a favor, no matter if you have kids or not. This is a contemplative space. It is centered around a 100-year-old beech tree. It is amazing. We opened it up back in September, and we recognized that there was going to be this important crosswalk getting folks to the park. And for $1,500, we invested in one of these flashing signs, and we put down the traffic tubes before we did that, and we put them down again afterwards, and we noticed an important and measurable behavior change in the motorists. So that's exciting. Up on Broadway, anybody who travels through Winter Hill knows that that may as well be runway 33L at Logan. Broadway is like 100 feet wide. Wide streets incentivized fast driving. Powder House Boulevard, Broadway to a certain extent, Holland Street are also examples of this. And we recognized that we didn't have those 8-figure budgets to do reconstruction up here for a few years, but our residents were demanding traffic calming, and Mike and Adam, another great staffer on my team, figured out that we could mimic the historic red brick crosswalks that you see in business districts like Davis Square. This is just traffic paint, and then we kind of create this optical illusion using tan paint to mimic a curb extension. This is a prototype. This is, again, relevant to Powder House Boulevard and many other locations in our neighborhood. This is the most dramatic change that we saw of all of our study cases, and we got like half a dozen of them. I won't give you all of them tonight. But folks, we're talking about average speeds of 30 miles per hour dropping to 23 miles per hour after the intervention. We are talking about 77% of the vehicles passing this crosswalk on Broadway that exceed 25 miles per hour before the intervention. After the intervention, only 36%. We're moving the needle with paint, with signage, and with community process. So bear with us. We're going to continue to do this stuff while we simultaneously figure out the hardcore civil engineering for raised crossings and curb extensions, as Mike was talking about earlier. Even a humble bike lane. Again, Katjana, you remember it. Folks were skeptical when we were talking about the importance of a climbing lane from the Rotary up to Packard or from North Street over to Curtis. But we've done a couple of experiments. Here's one in East Somerville where we've dropped a mile per hour off the travel speeds and dropped 10% of the vehicles who are exceeding 25. Again, it's about the optical illusion, tricking the driver into thinking that it's a skinnier street. They feel scared. They're worried about knocking mirrors. They drive slower. The stuff works. We take great pride in it. So, the centerpiece of my comments here are about the Green Line extension. Can I have a show of hands? Has anybody come to one of the 20 outreach events that we did this summer and fall? That's not a bad ratio. I'll try to keep it quick. We recognize that some people can come to community meetings at night in a school cafeteria. We recognize that some people are on email and some people are not. We recognize that some people speak English as a first language and some do not. As a result, it's so important for us to make sure that our outreach mechanisms are diverse, are robust, and are redundant. So in addition to regular community meetings, we were tabling at Artbeat, at Summer Streets, at all of the fixer fairs and rock and roll fairs down in Union. We were even setting up tables during brunch hour in Ball Square so that folks who were standing in line at the three brunch joints can actually see a table with a giant Green Line logo, see Erica Mace, myself, Jesse Moose, many others from the city's team, as well as the Green Line people. They actually were good sports, and they came out to educate our residents and to listen and to learn. And we recognized that we also needed to be able to, again, measure things. We were literally counting the number of people that we engaged with. And in these 20 meetings between roughly June and roughly October, we touched 2,200 of our constituents. We had 2,200 conversations. Is that all of what's needed? No, of course not. But it's great for us to see that we're leaving no stone unturned to make sure that folks don't get caught by surprise. As the mayor always says, we can't sugarcoat this. Closing the bridge is going to be hard. It was the consequence of saving the Green Line. They were serious about canceling this public works project. They were serious about canceling this subway extension that we fought for 40 years. And they told us loud and clear during that emergency rescoping process that they could save like $10 million a year of construction, all sorts of risk, if they were allowed to do this and just pull the Band-Aid off and do it at once. And so we didn't like it, but we believe in the Green Line that strongly. Okay, so here's the dialysis clinic, here's Hallmark Health, here's Kelly's Diner. This is my commute every day. Again, I'm coming from Ward 7 in Hillside neighborhood across the bridge on my bicycle, in my car, and on a bus. All three modes of travel are going to be impacted. We hate that. So we're trying to get the word out and offer some redundant ways for folks to get around. We're also trying to spread the word, not just to our residents, not just to our business owners. And on the business front, let me recognize Lauren Drago from the city's economic development staff, who's in the back. Lauren and her team have been doing yeoman's work, knocking on doors, getting merchants organized, making sure that we understand kind of the business realities of these types of closures. So if you're headed westbound from Magoon Square and Trump Field and trying to get to the Rotary and the west side, you're going to be detoured down Cedar Street. And folks, I know that the new bump outs that we've built on Cedar have their lovers and their haters, but they work. They slow the cars down. They keep our pedestrians safer. And it's a good thing because there's going to be a lot of cars diverted down there until people figure it out and frankly stay the heck out of Somerville if they have a choice. So they're going to go down Cedar Street south. They're going to turn right at Highland Ave. They're going to go down Highland into Davis. Another thing that we kind of had the vision and the opportunity to do, many of you will remember from the spring cycle, we were talking about the traffic signals in Davis. We changed the traffic signal cycles. It wasn't perfect. It was a short-term, short-money investment. It has added 8 green light cycles per hour. We have cut 45 seconds off the average user's trip through Davis Square. That's important when you think about the load that Davis is going to be asked to bear as part of this regional diversion. And then, of course, traffic will be going up Powder House, up College Ave to the Rotary. We're sharing the burden with our neighbors in Medford. They're frustrated too, just like we are. But again, everybody's kind of keeping their eyes on the prize. So the eastbound detour, if you're leaving our neighborhood and you're trying to get, again, to City Hall, to anywhere on the east side and the central side of the city, the legal detour is going to push you up Warner, past St. Clements, past Titan Gas, dive under the bridge, hang a right at Oasis Diner on Main Street, and approach the backside of what we think of as the backside of Magoon Square. We have advocated, and the MBTA's team is going to be updating traffic signal timing. So, again, think about Cedar Street. You don't need an eastbound phase if cars aren't using it for a year. So you can reallocate that time. And again, frankly, save Captain Donovan and his team some of the man hours and person hours necessary to station somebody. Having said that, Chief Fallon, Captain Donovan, they are allocating the resources to make sure that we've got boots on the ground, good trained, sworn officers up and down the detour routes.
Brad, if I could just ask, a number of people have asked me, what about the traffic that's outside of Somerville that's trying to cut through? So what kind of mitigation is going to happen there?
So the question was about regional traffic. As the mayor said, something like 4 out of 5 cars on our streets tend to be, people who have nothing to do with Somerville, not patronizing our businesses. They're not our residents. They're not our workers. They're just using us as the on and off ramp to Kendall or to the financial district. We have advocated, and MassDOT again has listened, that they're going to be putting advanced warning signage, not just here at Doherty's and the Rotary, not even just here at Teele, but way out of Route 16, out in West Med, up in Medford Square, even on the freeway. We want people who are coming up from Dorchester, from the port facilities in Charlestown and Chelsea, to have like 3 miles worth of notice that this bridge is out of service. And they've been good. They've actually purchased those signboards, and they'll be placing them on those regionally significant roadways. So that's one part of the outreach strategy. Sean, you mentioned the ComAv, the ComAv and the Mass Pike experience. MassDOT has actually shared their findings and their methodology from that with us. So they'll be doing the media push, the radio station ads, television stuff, big billboards, and they've really fine-tuned it based on the I-90 project, and they'll be replicating some of that methodology as well with kind of that all points bulletin for regional motorists. We have a Waze subscription. Megan works on that. We can try to trick the software and algorithm into getting people a little bit off their normal routine. Having said that, it's going to stink. The mayor and the board of aldermen have asked us for a process that would actually generate a shuttle service. And we're actually in the process of procuring those services from just a shuttle provider like SCM, who garages out here in front of the building every day, to just do a little horseshoe circulator route, because bus Route 80 and bus Route 89 are going to be severely impacted for that 1 year period. Simultaneously, we're also actually doing some cool stuff. We were in Ward 4 a couple nights ago talking about how a bus prioritization lane over in Broadway and Winter Hill, where you've got, again, that 100 feet of road width, can actually give a bus a dedicated way to jump the traffic at School Street, at Temple Street, at Marshall Street. The city of Everett, the city of Boston, city of Cambridge, city of Somerville have been doing this, measuring its effectiveness. Our buses, folks, for a region like Boston, are not carrying their fair share of the load. And usually it's because municipalities are not courageous enough to actually give them queue jumping privileges, to let a bus trigger the traffic light the same way that Chiefs Breen's ladder trucks coming out of the station here can trigger that traffic light. We need buses moving faster, and municipalities have an equal role to the MBTA itself. So we're going to be proposing for the near term some ways to get Route 89 moving quicker in this stretch to account for some of the time that they will lose on this stretch. And like I said, rubber tire shuttle service to just connect you essentially from Magoon to the Rotary and back to Willow Ave and Lindell's, mostly to support the merchants and transfers. So let me stop talking for a minute. Richard, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, have you not considered Winchester Street and Morrison as part of the detours? Those would be much simpler, straightforward. I know the residents are probably concerned, but they can be made one way with no parking on them, and I think you could make a much better detour situation.
We might have to go to PJ's and talk about this over a fine ale. My son's already in bed. I've already missed his bedtime. So these, Winchester's in the city of Medford. City of Medford has worked in collaboration with us. They have told us that that's not an acceptable solution for them. So, again, I look at it the same way, Richard. I'm like, let's use Winchester. One of the challenges is the turning radius, the tight kind of turn that everybody kind of knows over here at Harvard Street in Winchester. But Mayor Burke, her team, their residents, they've made that decision. We have had similar conversations, and anybody who came to our summertime meetings may remember that we were talking about actually using Morrison, using Willow for the bus operations. The MBTA service chief is a great Somerville resident who lives in Spring Hill. Her name's Melissa, and she's actually super frustrated with us because the most efficient way for them to keep their buses moving is to use one of these interior streets. All the community meetings we've had, the aldermen, the residents have said that would be just too much burden, and they were unwilling to do it. So we said, you know what, we're going to respect that. We're all dealing with a lot. We're trying to spread the pain as much as we can. I wish we could keep people moving in different ways, but this is a little bit of an island of a neighborhood, right? As the mayor says, we're going to get through it together. You've got our commitment. You've got a great communications team. We've really built out our staff. We're going to be responsive. We're going to be collecting data so that if a traffic spike occurs on a Kidder or a Willow in a given week or a given month, we can adjust some of the signal timing, the police detail presence. We can adjust the traffic calming measures, the speed bumps, the speed humps, the paint, et cetera, et cetera. The mayor has described this as a year-long snow emergency. He's like, what was our bunker mentality back in 2015? How can we apply that to these kind of longer term chronic challenges? And we'll be working on this stuff every day, okay? So I'm gonna start to wind down because Chief Breen and Captain Donovan also have their pieces, but I'll stick around until the last person has had their questions answered. Okay, bear with us, folks. Thank you. We appreciate your patience, your hard work. We are building a better Somerville. We're building more sustainable and equitable Somerville. So let's keep holding hands and get through this. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Charlie Breen, Fire Chief, Ward 6 resident. Want to speak briefly on the fire department and how we have to manage with all the construction going on. Somerville Fire Department has 5 fire stations. West Somerville is primarily protected by the Teele Sq Fire Station. They're backed up by the fire station at Highland Ave near Cedar Street. They're backed up by the fire station at Somerville Ave and Lowell Street. Then we have a fire station in Union Square and fire headquarters. Once the Ball Square Bridge closes, the greatest impact will be from fire headquarters trying to get west. But the 3 fire stations that primarily handle West Somerville will not really be majorly affected by the bridge closure. We have Teele Square, Highland Ave near Cedar, and Somerville Ave near Lowell Street. I've also, to cover any possible delays with the bridge closure, I have an agreement in place with the City of Cambridge. They've agreed to automatically send us apparatus from the fire station that's located on Mass Avenue just outside of Porter Square. Any reports of fires in West Somerville, once the bridge closes, there'll be an automatic response from Cambridge, and they can come right up Mass Ave, Cameron Ave, and they're actually, that fire station's actually closer to West Somerville than the Somerville Ave Fire Station, the Union Square Fire Station, and the headquarters. So we have that covered. We're also going to have a plan to, if things get busy in the West End, we'll move companies from East Somerville up to make sure there's protection up the West End. We also have a very good mutual aid system in effect with Arlington and Medford as well. So I just want to, rest assured that the fire department is on top of responses. It's very important to the mayor and to me, response times. NFPA wants to see us get our gear on in a minute and then be on scene in 4 minutes or less. And since I became chief, I have our analysts run me reports every week on any response times that we might see that are excessive. We call the officers in and have a talk. And we found that it could be a parking issue where they had trouble getting around a corner. I contact traffic and parking. We do some enforcement. Maybe there's a fire lane that's necessary. We've also modified responses. We found that maybe instead of, in some areas of West Somerville, instead of the response coming from Teele Square, maybe it could be quicker from Engine 7 on Highland Avenue. And we've made different responses. So we're constantly analyzing response times and making modifications. Once that bridge closes, at Ball Square, believe me, we'll be monitoring the situation every day to make sure there's no negative impacts. Data-wise, I just want to show you, in 2017, the average emergency response time for the fire department was 3 minutes and 28 seconds. And up till September of this year, despite everything going on, our average response time has actually dropped 8 seconds to 3 minutes and 20 seconds, which is well below the 5 minutes. As I said, it's very important for us to monitor these things, and the fire department has a seat at the table. Anytime construction's going on in the city, myself or one of my representatives are there. We meet with Brad, we meet with Rich Raich, the city engineer. We discuss how it's going to impact the fire department and what we need to do to possibly modify. Unfortunately, with the Ball Square Bridge, I'm going to be living on the wrong side of the bridge in a couple of months, and I'm going to have to find a different way to work. I get angry calls from my wife when she's driving my daughter up to the high school in the morning, yelling at me about all the traffic, and I have to say, Kathy, I'm only the fire chief. There's only so much I can do. Anybody have any questions, fire department related?
I have a question. I live on Elmwood Street, and there is a lot of construction going on, and on Tannery Brook Park there, the fire trucks, if they had to come through there, they wouldn't be able to. And then also, if they had to go down Elmwood Street, it possibly will be difficult because we have trucks that are about the length of a football field that cannot drive down. What they do is they back the trucks all the way down to the construction site. So now and then sometimes while they're waiting their turn to get down, they'll park right at the top of Elmwood Street to wait. So if, God forbid, a fire truck had to come down, how would a fire truck maneuver coming down Elmwood Street? They wouldn't possibly be able to get down Elmwood. They wouldn't be able to go from Cameron Ave through Tannery Brook. So we're in a bind.
I share your concern, and I'll personally drive down there tomorrow and take a look at it. You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
So, Katjana introduced me earlier. I'm Jim Donovan. I'm the patrol commander for the patrol division in the police department. So I oversee all the men and women you see driving around the black and white cars during the day. So they report to me in some sort or another. I'm here on behalf of Chief Fallon. He couldn't be here tonight, regretfully. My office is up in Teele Sq next to the muffin shop. I was at the last meeting. I offered people to come by and have coffee. I'd buy coffee. No one took me up on it. So I am there if you want to stop in. We have a lot of foot traffic in and out of there, and we love to see people during the day, and we love our neighborhood station. I hope everyone else likes having us up there as well. Great detective I am. I was at the Tufts building on the campus, so that's why they moved me out of detectives, put me in patrol. I guess they knew more than I did. So about myself, I grew up here. I'm preferential to Ward 7. My mom is still in Ward 7. She's up on Teele Ave. She's 87. So just don't share with the other wards. You guys get way more of my attention than anyone else does. That and Katjana keeps me busy. But I am preferential to Ward 7. I grew up here. I'm one of 6. So I love Teele Sq. I love Davis Square, Ball Square. I'm a West End guy. So I really enjoy being up here. As far as the police goes, I'm kind of moving along. So it's starting to snow. I'll make sure everyone gets home safe tonight. We show a little bit about crime trends, and as you can see, citywide, crime is down 2% over the last 2 years. Violent crime is down 18%, which is terrific. And 2018 is projected to be a 32-year citywide low, 69% decrease from 1987. And unbelievable statistic. And we'd like to take all the responsibility for it, but it's society, times are changing, but also community engagement. The fact that all you are here today, you take pride in your community, communicate with us, and you're involved. And that has an impact on crime. People reporting crimes and such. As you can see, the only downside is Ward 7 over the past 12 months. We did a 24% increase in index crimes, and that was car breaks. And just to kind of explain that a little bit better is we did have a small spike at one point in time, as you can see right down here. We identified that. We're data driven. Our crime analyst brought that to my attention. She said, "Hey, Jim, we're seeing a spike in our car breaks." And what we did was we reallocated our resources. We beefed up our resources in that area. And we did make some arrests. We made 2 arrests for car breaks, and those people could be attributable to a lot of those car breaks, but our presence as well. And we did see an immediate decrease. So I think we'll see those numbers change dramatically moving forward. As far as kind of crime prevention, residential, lock your doors. We always tell people, all these community meetings, lock your doors, lock your windows. We live in a great community. Somerville's a very safe community. When my children get older and they want to live in Somerville, I'm all for it. Like, it's a very, very safe community. It's a great community to live in, raise a family. But we always kind of give these tips to people, like always want crime prevention tips. Car breaks, believe it or not, people call and say the car was broken. The first thing we ask them is, were your doors locked? And everyone says yes. You're all lying. The windows aren't broken. No one has a magic beeper that can open your doors. Someone one day said to me, "Oh, you can buy a beeper online. It just opens the door." No, you cannot. So, lock your doors. I'm an offender. I park my car in my driveway. My wife will come in, out with the kids at night, and she'll open my doors, and I'll hear she'll be like, "Your doors are open." So I'm an offender as well. But I should practice what I preach. Just to notice some things that the police department is doing, your department is doing, is really quick, a little background. In 2014, in response to the Ferguson and everything that was happening in this country, President Obama commissioned a study about policing and where policing should go, where we should be going. And out of that study, they produced this giant document, which Chief Fallon made me read. And out of that document, basically, we broke it down. There's 6 pillars to that document. And Chief Fallon said, okay, how can we fulfill these 6 pillars? And we worked at it, and this is what we've been doing to kind of bring us up to the 21st century. And the first is building trust and legitimacy. So how do we get there? We focus on procedural justice. And the whole department went through procedural justice training. Building community relationships. You may have seen us over the summer walking around with a bunch of teens. We work together with teen empowerment, and we walk every single ward, and we do these surveys. And it helps the teens interact with adults and kind of, be more confident, helps build a relationship with the police. And through the survey, we learn more. We learn more about what you think, what the teens think. One of the things I learned that I brought up today in a training, which really blew my mind, and I don't think anyone would believe this. We asked the teens what they're most concerned about in life. It wasn't bullying, it wasn't opiates, it was school safety. It really, really opened our eyes. So these interactions with these community members, with our teens, we're learning from it. When I was in St. Clements for 12 years, I wasn't worried about school safety. It was the last thing I was worried about. So we're learning from it, and it's helpful. As far as policy and oversight, Chief Fallon has put all our policies online. So you can go online on our webpage, you can look at all our policies and procedures. You want to know how we do things? It's right there. That's how we are. We follow our policies and procedures. We're working towards certification. We're actually certified right now. Very few departments our size are certified, let alone accredited. We'll hopefully be accredited within 6 months. We're working towards it. As far as technology and social media, we've definitely enhanced our presence in social media. I can't tell you how many times I call our IT guy and say, hey, put this out on our Twitter account, put it on Facebook. I think we're actually a little behind at times. My kids will tell me, Dad, no one uses Facebook anymore, but old people like you. But we're out there. As far as community policing and crime reduction, just a note, in 2018, we were awarded the Community Policing Award for the category of 50,000 population and over by the New England Chiefs Association. Again, teen empowerment, our relationship with teen empowerment. As far as education and training, again, some trainings we're doing to make us better is impartial policing training, procedural justice and legitimacy training, which I mentioned, and our CORE program. And that stands for community outreach and help recovery. And everyone knows it's no secret, opioids, mental health issues. Those are things we're working on. In our CORE program, we have clinicians, licensed psychologists, all working out of the police department helping us. So when our officers identify a home that's either going through an addiction problem or someone's going through mental health issues, our officers now come back to the station, they go into the CORE program, share that information with them, and we're doing outreach to those families, those people suffering from addiction. On officer wellness is our last point there, and what's not there is the chief made the whole department go through a wellness training last year, and it was mindfulness. And when you told officers they were going through mindfulness training, they were looking at you sideways. And they were like, we were doing yoga, and we all went down. We had training down at the Partners building down Assembly Row. And I would say, I'd eventually guess 90% of the officers that walked out of that day thought it was great training. Bringing things up that we don't think about every day, about our own health, about our own safety, about our own mental wellness. Because how can we help you unless we're mentally well going in ourselves? And we always include these slides at the end of our presentations. It's just some of the resources that we have available to us and you have available to you. So if anyone has any questions, I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to leave till the last person leaves. I know there's a hand up. I'll talk to you individually just so the people who want to run out because of the snow can leave. But I am not leaving until everyone's done answering questions. So thank you for your time.
It is. There's a little dusting. So I know that was kind of a lot of information in trying to keep it to a relatively short amount of time because I know those chairs are not super comfortable. There's a ton more stuff we could have talked about, but no one wanted to have a sleepover, so we'll let you go. There are a lot of opportunities to get or stay involved with all the things you heard tonight. As well as a ton of other things that are going on. Some of the ways you can find out about that, the mayor had mentioned the construction email newsletter. We also have a general city email newsletter. All of this information is on our city website. We share a lot of it on social media. We also send notices out to local media outlets and our city cable channels. So definitely, check out some of those sources once in a while, find out what's going on. Hopefully you heard about something that you are interested in following along with or staying or being a part of. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We will be back again in the spring. Thank you.